In the 1980s, Japan was cooking up quiet killers, humble-looking cars with factory turbos and hidden muscle. One of these could dust a Corvette at a red light and still look like your uncle's daily driver. Let's dive in. Number 10, 1988 Subaru Leone RX Turbo 4-wheel drive sedan. A car that looked like it belonged in a snow-covered retirement town, but could leave a V6 Camaro scratching its head at a stoplight? Let's talk about this unassuming beast from Japan's northern frontier. While other brands flaunted wide body kits and spoilers in the late 80s, this one kept things brutally honest. A narrow square sedan with plastic wheel covers and grocery-run vibes. But tucked underneath that suburban disguise was a surprisingly capable machine. Introduced in 1988, this sedan carried a 1.8-liter turbocharged flat-4 EA82T, producing around 115 horsepower and 134 pound-feet of torque. Doesn't sound like much until you factor in its weight. Just over 2,500 pounds and paired with a symmetrical, full-time four-wheel drive system. That meant 0 to 60 in under 9 seconds. Not groundbreaking today, but quick enough to keep up with many V6-powered coupes of its time in any weather. And that's where this thing thrived, on slippery streets, gravel back roads, and snowy corners. It was Japan's answer to rally tech in a family car disguise. This was the same drivetrain that helped Subaru dominate the dirt before the WRX ever existed. The RX Turbo's low center of gravity and locking center differential gave it a confidence on twisty terrain that most sportier cars couldn't match. But it wasn't perfect. The engine ran hot, the interior was Spartan even by 80 standards, and the turbo lag was real. It wasn't the kind of car you showed off. It was the kind of car that showed you what it could do when no one was watching. Next up is a hatchback that looked like a leftover from a computer lab parking lot, yet had enough boost to stun an RX-7. Curious? Stick around. Number 9, 1983 Nissan Pulsar EXA Turbo. It looked like something your older cousin drove to community college, maybe with a few textbooks and a cassette mixtape in the back seat. But under that awkward wedge-shaped body, a turbocharged surprise that could embarrass bigger names without breaking a sweat. The 1983 Nissan Pulsar EXA Turbo didn't roll off the line with grand ambitions. It was marketed as a compact, affordable hatch for young buyers, quirky, angular, and about as threatening as a VHS instructional video. But the E15 ET engine, a 1.5-liter SOHC inline-4 with a single turbocharger, changed the game. It cranked out 113 horsepower and 123 pound-feet of torque in a car that weighed just a touch over 2,000 pounds. That's featherweight. That's dangerously light when you add boost. With a 0 to 60 time hovering around 8.5 seconds, it wasn't setting any records, but it was fast where it counted. Quick off the line, nimble in city corners, and deceptively aggressive once spooled up, the EXA Turbo had the heart of a fighter and the looks of a fax machine. And for front-wheel drive, the handling was surprisingly sharp, helped by its short wheelbase and lively chassis. Of course, it wasn't without flaws. The interior plastics felt like recycled calculator shells. The turbo lag came with a pause long enough to sip your coffee, and to most eyes, it just didn't look serious. But maybe that's why it worked so well. No one saw it coming. And while this hatch was busy sneaking past bigger fish, the next car wore a suit, shook your hand, and then left you coughing in its exhaust. A formal sedan hiding a factory turbo and a dangerous secret. Coming up next. Number 8, 1987 Toyota Carina ED 2.0 GTT. It had the posture of a salaryman's company car. Clean lines, formal grille, and zero attitude. But under that polite exterior, a silent predator built to chase rivals far outside its league. The 1987 Toyota Carina ED 2.0 GTT wasn't flashy. It didn't scream turbo or performance with decals or scoops. In fact, at a glance, you'd probably think it was just another Camry clone. But this car shared more than a passing connection with Toyota's sportier Celica and Corona platforms. Under the hood sat a 2.0-liter DOHC 3SGELU engine, essentially a detuned sibling of the 3SGTE, with 160 horsepower and 137 pound-feet of torque, fed through a turbocharger and sent to the front wheels. It moved from 0 to 60 in just over 8 seconds, which was no joke for a mid-size front-wheel drive car in the late 80s. And what really set it apart? Its balance. Unlike raw bruisers of the era, the Carina ED offered a surprisingly refined drive, tight steering, stable under throttle, and smooth enough to mask how quickly it could close the distance on a supposed sports car. Sure, it had its weak spots. Torque steer made itself known during aggressive launches. The suspension leaned more toward comfort than cornering. And the styling? Understated to the point of invisibility. But that's what made it such a potent sleeper. You never expected it to be fast. Would you have bet on this against something like a Prelude or Sylvia back in the day? Drop a comment and let me know. Would you give this forgotten GTT a second look if it pulled up next to you? Now we're heading into stranger territory, a turbo coupe from a brand you probably forgot existed, styled by an Italian, tuned by the British, and powered like a backstreet brawler. You won't want to miss this one. Number 7, 1986 Isuzu Piazza Turbo XE. It looked like it should have been on the cover of a 1980s design magazine. Sleek, wedge-shaped, and more European than Japanese. But this wasn't some fragile concept car. It was a misunderstood brawler, hiding real performance under its sharp suit. The 1986 Isuzu Piazza Turbo XE, sold as the Impulse in some markets, was one of Japan's most bizarre collaborations. Styled by Giorgetto Giugiaro, it carried the grace of an Alfa Romeo, and thanks to Lotus-tuned suspension, it handled like something straight out of England's countryside. But beneath all that European flair was a heart that was all turbocharged aggression. A 2.0-liter SHC inline-4, force-fed through a turbo to produce 147 horsepower and 166 pound-feet of torque. In a car weighing just over 2,600 pounds, that meant 0 to 60 in around 7.5 seconds. Quick enough to startle bigger coupes that never saw it coming. The rear-wheel drive layout gave it balanced dynamics, while its short overhangs and tuned chassis made it a joy to toss into corners. On paper, it was a proper driver's car. On the road, it was an enigma, a car that nobody really knew how to categorize. And maybe that's why it never got the love it deserved. The styling was too strange for the mainstream. Isuzu wasn't exactly a performance badge. And while the Lotus badge looked good in brochures, it didn't translate to massive sales. But for those in the know, it was a stealth weapon, refined, quick, and misunderstood. We're just getting warmed up. If you're into rare, underrated Japanese machines that hide their horsepower behind boring badges and bland bodywork, smash that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. Number 6, 1985 Nissan Laurel Metalist Turbo C32. You'd expect to see it parked outside a bank, not flying past one. Boxy, chrome-trimmed, and conservatively styled, the kind of sedan a mid-level manager would proudly hand down to his son. But behind the modest pinstripes, something dangerous was lurking. The 1985 Nissan Laurel Metalist Turbo C32 was anything but a commuter slouch. Beneath its squared-off executive exterior sat the RB20DET, a 2.0-liter DOHC turbocharged straight-six that pumped out 170 horsepower and 134 pound-feet of torque. This was one of the earliest applications of Nissan's now legendary RB series. It wasn't just quick for its size, it was quiet, composed, and shockingly capable. Paired with rear-wheel drive and independent rear suspension, the Laurel offered refined dynamics with a side of rebellion. It could reach 0 to 60 in just under 8 seconds, but it never broke a sweat doing it. The turbo came on smoothly, power delivery was linear, and the car soaked up high-speed pulls like a true Autobahn cruiser, only without any of the show-off attitude. Inside, it leaned into comfort, plush velour seats, digital dash options, and enough wood trim to qualify as a rolling boardroom. But that's what made it dangerous. No one expected this thing to move. It was a car you'd pass over in an auction without a second glance, and you'd be dead wrong too. Still, it wasn't perfect. The automatic transmission softened the edge a bit, and its weight worked against it in tight corners. But for rolling speed and stealth, the Laurel was a boss in disguise. And next up, a hatchback so plain it could have been a delivery car. But give it boost, and it became a front-wheel drive firecracker that smoked far more expensive rivals. You won't see this one coming. Number 5, 1983 Toyota Soarer 2.0 GTT twin-turbo GZ10. It looked like something your high school principal might have driven. Long, quiet, and a little too proud of its pop-up headlights. But under all that polished restraint, a factory twin-turbo setup that could rattle the ego of sports cars twice the price. Meet the 1983 Toyota Soarer 2.0 GTT twin-turbo GZ10. While the Supra hogged the spotlight overseas, this luxury coupe played it cool at home, keeping its speed cards close to the chest. Toyota engineered the Soarer to glide through the city like a flagship, but they didn't forget to give it teeth. Sitting under the hood was the 1GGTE, a 2.0-liter inline-six, force-fed by two CT12 turbochargers, making a confident 185 horsepower and around 174 pound-feet of torque. That might sound modest by today's standards, but for a luxury coupe in '83, that was nuclear. This thing could hustle to 60 miles per hour in about 7.2 seconds, which made it quicker than many contemporary Mustangs and Z cars. And because it was rear-wheel drive, with a weight balance that leaned toward grand touring, it could dance through corners with grace if you knew what you were doing. But what really sealed its sleeper status? Everything about the Soarer screamed refined cruiser. The digital dash, the smooth ride, the plush seats, no wings, no scoops, no loud exhausts. Just clean lines and a quiet promise that if you stepped on it, it would embarrass someone loudly dressed in a Porsche jacket. Of course, it wasn't perfect. Turbo lag was noticeable, and its luxury weight meant it wasn't nimble in tight twists. But in a straight line, it could humble more aggressive machines without even loosening its tie. Coming up next is a wagon that looked like it belonged at a PTA meeting, until the turbo kicked in and turned it into a freight train on boost. Stay tuned. Number 4, 1986 Mazda 626 Turbo GT GC platform. It had the silhouette of a family errand runner, flat panels, squared-off corners, and a face that said reliable, not reckless. But under the hood of this quiet commuter, enough turbocharged torque to wipe the smug off a Celica GTS. Enter the 1986 Mazda 626 Turbo GT, part of the GC platform lineup, and probably the last car you'd suspect of harboring a grudge. On the surface, it looked like a middle manager's lease special, but hidden under that modest four-door skin was a 2.0-liter FET turbocharged inline-4, pushing out 120 horsepower and 150 pound-feet of torque, sent to the front wheels through either a slick 5-speed manual or a laid-back automatic. Sure, 120 horsepower doesn't sound like much today, but back in '86, this was the same output as some entry-level sports coupes. And what really made it move was the torque. It hit early, it hit hard, And thanks to the car's relatively light curb weight, the 626 Turbo GT could crack 0 to 60 in around 8.5 seconds, all while looking like it was heading to a dental appointment. Mazda didn't give it flares, spoilers, or aggressive styling. Instead, it wore restraint like armor. The only real hint? A tiny turbo badge, easily missed unless you knew where to look. Inside, it offered bolstered seats, a driver-focused cockpit, and, if you were lucky, a digital dash setup that screamed peak 80s futurism. It was the kind of car you didn't just underestimate, you outright ignored, until it blew past you. Its flaws? Sure. FWD torque steer under boost was a handful. The suspension wasn't track-tuned, and the turbo lag below 3,000 RPM could make it feel sluggish in traffic. But on a back road or freeway pull, it came alive. Now get ready, because next up is a car that looks like a sleepy wedge of 80s economy. But underneath, it's hiding a rally-grade powertrain that should have never been street legal. Number 3, 1987 Mitsubishi Galant VR Turbo. From a distance, it looked like it belonged in your uncle's driveway. Boxy, beige, and barely awake. But this quiet four-door had a secret. It shared DNA with Mitsubishi's earliest rally experiments. And when the boost hit, it stopped playing nice. The 1987 Mitsubishi Galant VR Turbo didn't need spoilers or body kits to earn respect. It just needed a good stretch of road and a driver with a heavy right foot. While the world was distracted by the rise of the Lancer evolution, this Galant was already laying the groundwork. Under the hood sat the 4G63B, a 2.0-liter turbocharged inline-4, the same legendary block that would go on to power the Evo dynasty. In this earlier form, it made around 144 horsepower and 137 pound-feet of torque, pushing the car from 0 to 60 in about 8 seconds. Nothing earth-shattering on paper, but real-world performance told a different story. Thanks to its low weight, smart gearing, and permanent all-wheel drive, the Galant VR could launch with urgency most family sedans only dreamed of. Wet pavement, gravel, it didn't care. This was Mitsubishi sneaking rally-bred traction into what looked like a commuter car for a civil engineer. And if you knew how to tune it, well, this motor had plenty more to give. But it wasn't flawless. The suspension leaned soft, and the styling was practically invisible. No flares, no aggression, no flex. And maybe that's why it slipped under the radar. It didn't ask to be noticed. It just waited to surprise you. The next one? It's even more low profile. Something you'd swear was built to teach driving lessons. But wait till you hear what happens when the turbo spools up. Like sleeper cars that shouldn't be legal? Tap that subscribe button. We've got more forgotten legends coming that'll change how you see every driveway. Number 2, 1988 Nissan Bluebird SSS Turbo Atesa U12. You'd mistake it for a taxi. Straight lines, flat panels, no drama. Just a name badge that sounded like it belonged on a hotel shuttle. But this nothing special sedan had a secret weapon, a drivetrain borrowed from the future. The 1988 Nissan Bluebird SSS Turbo Atesa U12 was one of those rare blink and you'll miss it machines. It didn't scream for attention. No flared fenders, no wild colors, not even a hint of sport. Yet underneath that square, understated shell was something revolutionary. Nissan's ATTESA full-time all-wheel drive system, years before it became famous in the Skyline GTR. Paired with a 1.8-liter CA18DET turbocharged inline-4, it made around 167 horsepower and 166 pound-feet of torque, enough to launch this bland-looking box from 0 to 60 in the low 7-second range. And that was the stock setup. Tuners knew the CA18DET could handle far more, some pushing over 250 horsepower without touching internals. But even in factory trim, the Bluebird had all the right parts. a responsive turbo, a short final drive, an AWD grip that made it surprisingly sharp through the corners. Inside, it was all business. Hard plastics, cloth seats, and a layout that clearly prioritized function over flair. But that made the surprise even sweeter, because the guy next to you at the light had no idea you had rally-ready hardware under your right foot. It wasn't perfect. The chassis felt more commuter than Canyon Carver, and the styling was about as neutral as a government-issued envelope. But maybe that was the point. This was stealth performance done to near perfection. Would you take this over a rear-wheel drive turbo car from the same era? Drop a comment and let me know. The first car on the list is a boxy little beast with digital gauges, angular charm, and enough turbo grunt to earn its own theme song in an 80s cop show. Are you ready for the reveal? Number 1, 1989, Toyota Cresta GT Twin Turbo GX81. It looked like something your boss would lease. Sharp suit, company lot, nothing more. But behind the wheel, this thing was way too fast for its own good, and no one saw it coming. The 1989 Toyota Cresta GT Twin Turbo GX81 was Toyota's idea of a luxury sedan, but only on the surface. Underneath, it shared its bones with the Chaser and Mark II, quietly inheriting Toyota's more rebellious genes. What made this Cresta different wasn't the wood trim or crisp creases, it was what sat under the hood. A 1G GTE, a 2.0-liter twin turbocharged inline-six, factory rated at 210 horsepower and 203 pound-feet of torque. That might not sound wild today, but for a formal-looking sedan in the late 80s, that was borderline criminal. Mated to a rear-wheel drive layout and a surprisingly tight suspension setup, the Cresta GT could hustle 0 to 60 in just under 7 seconds, faster if you remove the soft limiter or breathed on the turbos a bit. The power delivery was smooth, almost too refined, and that made it even more dangerous. It wasn't loud. It didn't buck or scream. It just moved. Swiftly, silently, and with zero drama. Exactly how a proper sleeper should behave. What made it even more under the radar was the design. No aggressive skirts, no gaudy graphics, just a square executive silhouette with tasteful badging and a dignified stance. You'd never think to second-guess it, unless you saw the GT Twin Turbo badge tucked quietly into the corner. And yes, there were flaws. The automatic transmission robbed some urgency, and the steering felt more boardroom than backroad. But those were minor details when you considered the total package. This wasn't just a fast car hiding in plain sight. It was a whole performance sedan hidden inside a business suit. Which one of these quiet beasts would you throw the keys to for a surprise night out? No show, just pure hidden power. Drop your favorite sleeper in the comments below. Smash that subscribe button and buckle up, because next time, we're uncovering sleepers so wild they almost rewrote the rules of speed. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.